Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, no matter where you are.
Welcome to Duzie Live, where we observe your fear. Thank you for joining us. Maybe some of you are joining us live. Some of you are joining us by replay. We welcome you all. Thank you so much for coming.
Now, Susie said something about observing your fear. We're not here observing your fear. The theme of the day is observe your fear. We want to dive into fear. How does it actually affect our life? How do we actually process it? When is it good? When is it bad? We want to dive into those things today. But let's start with a fearful story.
When I was 17 years old in high school, I would wake up first in our household. I come from a large family. There's 8 kids, and I was the first to wake up. I'm not quite sure why, but I woke up first. I'd have my shower, and when I was done, I would walk through the living room, down the steps, down this little hallway, and then that's where my brothers were sleeping. Now, I had done that every day for a long, long time, maybe a couple of years. I don't know exactly, but I did not need to turn on any lights. It was pitch dark in the house. So on this particular day, I did my usual shower, then head to the boys' room. And when I went to the boys' room, I would just reach in the inside of the door and switch on the light. Well, this particular day,
you were the boys' alarm clock.
I was, because it was hard for them. So I'd switch on the light and then begin the process of trying to help them wake up. And so on this particular day, when I got to the light switch had a unique difference. There, when I went to switch on the light, like right on Dan's chest, my brother Jim was standing. Now, he's the one who's the dentist.
A human body.
He was not the practical joker. He was the one who kept us solid and thinking clearly. Love you, Jim. But this day in particular, he must have woken up early and knew I was coming. He was going to stand there to greet me. He didn't say a word, but when I went to switch on the light, I was startled. He caught me off guard, and I let out this blood curdling.
She can scream.
It didn't stop. It just kept going, and he was shaking me, going, "Suze, it's me. It's Jim. You're okay. You're okay." It took me a long time to get them. And that was a fear response. I think I'm so grateful that I am not afraid of the dark. I'm not thinking of any random human being standing in rooms. Like, that experience to me now just gives me a great laugh, but it's not a fear-inducing story at all.
Now, you may be thinking of fears in your life that you have because of something like this. Maybe something happened and that's why you're afraid of the dark. Some things are little fears where they don't really matter, but there are other fears that are crippling. They keep us from living fully alive. They keep us from being in the flow. And that's what we want to look at today. We want to step back, not just face our fears, but really observe them and take a look. Why are they there, and what purpose are they filling? Because not all fears are wrong. Some fears, Dave will be on later. Some fears are, there's a bear in the road ahead of me. I fear being attacked by a bear, so I'm going to go the other way.
This is David Taylor, who is on our Driving with Zoe video, just in case you have or haven't seen it.
Yeah, or going to the edge of a cliff and knowing I can't go any farther because if I do, I will fall. That kind of fear is actually healthy. You are probably alive because of those fears. That's not what we're looking at. We're looking at the kind of fears that keep you from living fully alive.
So we are going to observe our fear. In that, we're going to look at it. We're going to try to give you some tools and resources to help you know what to do with your fear and whether to bring some truth into the situation or to back off, pull in people. And what we want to do is invite you into the chat space. So when you come on, for those of you who are already on, will you come in and put your name and where you're coming from so we can speak to you and understand who you are and who's with us. And at any time, you just, for us, it's over on this side, just type in any question or comment that you have. We're also today going to be using quite a bit more videos. So we're going to pop in videos. And when those videos are in, we can respond in the chat space. So we want you to chat at any time. Those of you who are live will be able to respond to it. Those of you who are coming to us by replay will be able to see those those comments that you make, and we'll respond to them
They come
by
like an email to us.
Yeah, we'll respond to them. We try to find all of those, and we'll respond to you later. So please make your comments whenever you're seeing them, and we'll be able to catch up at different moments.
Yeah. So we've got a few. Looks like you're logged on. Thank you very much. We're going to move on through, and we want to give you the introduction to our course in the Flow course, the module on fear. It starts off with an introduction, and we were going to re-talk a lot of that, but I think it's better if we watch the video.
Yeah.
And we'll be in the chat during the video. We can talk about things, but to get the idea of where we want to go today in this webinar, really it comes from this whole idea of observing your fear, and we want to watch a video now. Welcome to Flow Module 3, which is Observe Your Fear.
So 2 Timothy 1:7 is our key verse for this whole segment, and it says, God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and love and a sound mind. And we really want to look in this module about how God can take our fear and change it into something really useful.
Now, if you've been watching the other modules, you'll know we've been outside. We've been in nature, surrounded by trees. What fear does is it locks us up. It's like the wall of fear. We get ourselves in these places where we can't see the things that God has made because we're locked up in fear. Fear stops the flow. Fear stops us right in our tracks. It's like, I got this cage. And we're not made to live in the cage.
Nope.
Now the cage has a door. But for many of us, we don't even dare open that. Our fear, in a way, we use it to protect ourselves. We don't risk. We're not brave. We choose to live with our fear. The problem when we do that is the flow stops.
That's right.
Fear will always take you someplace. It will allow you to leap forward as you observe it and say, this is my journey ahead, or it'll take you backwards. It's like a dam on a river. If you allow it to grow, the flow stops. We need to live outside of our cage.
So here's what happens with fear. There's conflict on the outside, and what happens inside is our response. And it's called fight, flight, or freeze response.
I'll say that again.
Fight, flight, or freeze. So what happens is when the conflict happens and something we perceive as like, oh no, that shouldn't come my way, then we have our body that is gearing up inside. Our blood moves faster, our heart beats faster, our breathing is faster, and blood moves out to the extremities of our body. And so when we fight, we can have a response of like, we go at it. Or the flight is we run away, we try to get away. Or freeze, we're just not quite sure what to do. So it's like, we're frozen. And we can do that physically, but we can also do all of those three responses emotionally as well. We can fight, we can fly, or run away, or we can freeze and just get stopped in our flow.
When I think of the word fear, I like acronyms. You'll notice that. Flow, everything's acronym. But when I think about it, I saw this not too long ago on the internet. Fear stands for false evidence appearing real.
Yeah.
Let me say that again. Fear, you take F-E-A-R. False evidence appearing real. When that takes place, when we think that's real, we're either going to fight it, we're going to flight, take off, or it's going to cause us to freeze, stop. Because the conflict always comes from the outside. Very rarely does conflict come from the inside. It comes from the outside, but the fear goes inside.
Yep.
That fear is going to make me want to hide, or it's going to want me to get anxious. What's going on? You can't sleep, you can't eat, you can't... Are you going to fight? It's going to bring out that anger.
Yep.
It's coming from the outside. We have to observe it. That's what this module is about. Don't run away. Step up, take a look at it, and respond to it. We're going to give you some techniques of what to do to respond to the fear that we observe.
Yeah, so as Dan just said, many of the interchangeable words that go together with fear could be anxiety or anger. These are different ways that different people respond to it. And there are a few techniques, basic techniques, when you're facing any kind of fear, anxiety, or anger. And it's called bottom up or top down.
Ooh, explain
The
that.
bottom up techniques can happen as we go from the bottom up and we slow our breathing, because our breathing and our heart rate goes faster. If we take slow, deep breaths, it gives us time. It allows the blood to go from the far parts, extremities, hands, feet, back to where we need it, in our center portion. That is the bottom up. So our breathing, slowing our breathing and taking control of our breathing. Top down techniques have to do with retraining our mind. And the beginning of that is mindfulness, being aware of what is happening. Maybe not in the exact moment when it's happening, because not all of us are able to catch it that quick. That's why journaling is so important, because you can journal your responses and understand what's going on when these different situations happen. There's something else called CBT, or cognitive behavioral therapy, and it's retraining of your brain. So we're going to talk about some of these very practical ways to identify and observe your fear, but also ways for you to combat it and to take steps toward not being so controlled by your fear, so that you can have the flow.
God did not give us the spirit of fear, but power, love, and sound mind. This module is all about how to actually look at our fear. What is it? And why is it there? And how do we move forward into the flow?
Thanks so much for joining us for this module, Observe Your Fear.
All right, we are back, and we've been joined by a few others. Welcome, everyone.
Yes.
That's an introduction video just looking at our fear. Where does it come from? Some of the questions we're going to be asking ourselves. And so welcome to all of you as we look at Observe Your Fear.
So, yeah, we'd like to welcome those of you who are on. We've got Dale coming in. We've got Illy. We've got David, Cheryl, and others of you who are coming in. Thank you for those who just popped in. We really are enjoying that you are going to be with us live. And, of course, there's a group of people who are following us on the replay because the time doesn't work for them.
Yeah.
So
Just
welcome.
A technical question. We just got a comment that the volume that we're speaking at is very different than the video. If you have any comments at all, feel free just to put them in the chat. We can't control the volume you hear us at, but we can turn down our microphones if that's needed.
Yeah.
But just help us out there. And I heard someone came in late because of some technical issues. All those kind of things that you
feedback to us.
learn. Yeah, feedback to us so we can do this better. We've had to change the webinar from being something that you can subscribe to every single week because some people did that and then they were subscribed and they came and they went to last week's one to this week, and then there was some confusion, a wrong. So we think we've got it now, but we're continually learning because you're speaking to us. So thank you for that.
Yeah, so we want to put the question up, and we would love for each of you to type in the chat space, how does fear appear in your life? I told you the story about I had an opportunity for fear when I tried to switch on the light and it was my brother there. That was a surprise shock value moment. But different ones of us have different fears that we're facing. I think one of my fears that I recently, I'll just get us started here. One of my fears that I am facing lately is like, as I'm getting older, I'm not that old yet. Old is very relative. But I was like, am I always going to be this out of shape? And I thought, no, I can do something about it. So I have a fear and I'm taking steps to grow. We'll talk about that a little bit more. And the other thing that I'm doing, I'm on this 30-day exercise plan. Today is day 4. So I'm consistently doing it along with a YouTube program that I found that was a good fit for me. And so that was one of my fears. So this fear to being in shape and being healthy, it appeared in my life in this way. And my response was to get a little bit extra level of discipline and to go for it. What about you? How does fear appear in your life? What is the fear? What do you do with it?
Yeah. As you're writing those things down, if you're not in the flow course yet, in the fear module, I took a challenge to record my fears. And I came up with 15, but I narrowed them down to 12 that I really am facing right now. And probably maybe 2 of them I actually realized before I sat down and observed what my fears were. Now, again, I'm not jumping into all of them at one time, taking a little bit at a time. But as I reach and I start working in one fear, it seems connected to another. So several of them are getting attention at the same time, even though I'm just focusing on 1 or 2.
Yeah, so I just began the sharing. If you're in the flow course, you're going to get this, or you can go to the flow course later and download these PDFs. Dan made a document about these 12 fears that he observed he was having in his life and what he's doing about it. And maybe it'll give you an idea of something that you can do for yours.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Illy says she's listening with friends. Hi, friends.
Hello.
We love the Netherlands. So yeah, maybe we'll meet you someday. That would be awesome.
It's good. Yes. Welcome all of you.
Yeah.
So if you have something there of a fear that you'd like to share, we're going to jump into. In a little bit, we're going to take some of those fears and try to take them through a tool called the No Yes tool, or what's the one you're teaching? It's the growth
It is the
tool?
exposure growth tool. Yeah. So
because we want to make this really practical, that you can take some of the things that you may be dealing with and how to actually move forward towards life.
Yeah. Yeah, so in the process, maybe we have a quick video about the top 10 fears. Let's see if I can find that quickly. The top 10 fears, is that the one?
Yep.
Right there. So this is a study that we did research on top 10 fears, and they ended up being physical fears and then the emotional fears and some of where they come from. So we just want to play this.
As you listen to this, as you watch this,
it might give you
just take a little bit of notes in your head. I have that one. I don't have that one, but I know someone who does. Just sort of walk this with us.
And feel free to just type in what those fears are and what's going on with those.
Let's talk about fears. I've done a lot of research about fears, very interesting, and I have a whole whiteboard list I'm going to tell you about. Top 10 fears, the 12 most common, and 3 areas where these fears come from. So join me as we talk about fears. Research says some of the top 10 fears are open spaces, heights, flying, enclosed spaces, insects, snakes, that's one of my big fears, dogs, storms, and needles. These are phobias, or so they're called. But these are things that are like on the outside, or places that we are physically, or responses to physical stimuli. But there are also emotional fears that many of us have. And another study says the 12 most common fears that keep you from success include failure, fear of success, fear of being judged, fear of emotional pain, fear of embarrassment, fear of being abandoned or alone, fear of rejection, fear of expressing your true feelings, fear of intimacy, fear of the unknown, fear of loss, and fear of death. Now, these are all very common, top common fears of going towards success or existing in the world. And some of the fears are real and some of them are not real. So where do these fears come from? Louis Giglio talks about 3 sources of fear. One is conditioning, another is concealing, and the third is controlling. Let's talk about those for a moment. Conditioning, where do we get these fears from? Many of us are conditioned to have these fears from our family. For example, my mom is claustrophobic. And I don't know if I learned to be claustrophobic from my mom or if I actually am claustrophobic, which I am. I'm getting better. I have to tell myself, oh, you're okay. It's not such an enclosed space. Some of us get some of our fears from our culture. Some cultures have different fears than the others. In our 77 countries, we know that Asians have some fears. Some Africans generally have different fears than others. Latin Americans, Europeans, Americans. We all have different cultural fears based on the input that we get or true, real fears. Maybe we have conditioning from work or our friend group that condition us to have fears for a different reason. That's conditioning. Secondly, there's concealing. When we conceal or we close up the fear or we don't really nail it on the head or observe, face our fear, we hide, we have secrets, we don't properly process those fears, that's gonna be a source of our fears as well. And the third area, controlling. When we're trying to control our situation or we want to be controlled, for example, be perfect, or we want to not be out of our comfort zone, we don't want to be in a panic, then we're going to have these fears that might feel enlarged or a little bit out of control. And in the next section, we're going to give you a worksheet that helps you work through some of these potential fears that you have and what you can do about it.
All right.
All right, welcome back. Right now I have it open for sharing, and this is a PDF document that's inside the Flow course. But for those of you who aren't there yet, it's called Where Do Fears Come From? And it is the processing of everything that we just talked about right there in that video about the 10 most common, the 12 fears that we have when thinking about failure or success. And then those 3 spaces. Generally, there could be a lot more spaces where we get our fears from.
It was interesting, David, your comment about you haven't earned any money for 3 years. I get that. And the whole idea of value and the connection to that, and that can take us in some really destructive areas, some non-life stuck areas, if we allow it to go there. And we need to go through and process, okay, why these things were happening or weren't happening. And I see, I mean, just knowing your situation, David, the fact that you didn't work didn't mean you weren't working.
You were volunteering.
So it in the world that we live in, sometimes there is this perceived thought that other people have. But I also know that people who've gone through what you've gone through suddenly move into great spaces.
Yes.
Because an employer will say, I want that selflessness or something else. So again, you have to balance what is fear and what is true.
All right. And Dale, thank you for your comment. Fear is often a learned behavior from childhood actions and examples and experiences or observations. Like, for example, me with my mom and claustrophobia. Honestly, I just now saw that video and the snake. Whenever I see a snake, even a picture of a snake, I have to look away and go, Dan, is it done yet? Because the exposure level, I'm trying to like expose myself to a fear, like that snake on the video or on the TV or in that picture is not real. But even just seeing that,
let's just stop
just
for a
gives me a
moment.
little bit of a like towards panic.
Let's stop for a moment with this whole idea of the snake.
Okay.
And let's look at what is true and what is not true.
All right.
Now, I will never come to a place of going, that fear is not rational, because she feels it.
Oh, yeah.
But were you ever bitten by a snake?
No, but shall I tell you where my fear came from?
You were never bitten by a snake. One's never actually attacked you.
No.
Okay. So see, these are interesting things. You could see someone be terrified by a snake because they were once attacked by one. Maybe someone swallowed their car or something. But usually that's not the case. Usually it's a perceived or it's connected to a story. What's the story?
Yeah, for me, when I was a girl, in our backyard, we had a field, and all of us and any neighbors we could find, we'd go back there and play games. Well, the grass was kind of knee high by that time. I was short, but it was knee high, so maybe this tall. And we were all gathered in a circle, getting ready, making the rules of the game or finding out who was it. I don't remember the details of that. We were just in a circle, and in the middle of the circle comes this snake, and the snake went up and pointed right at me and
pointed at Suzie.
Nose to nose me. But, I just want to be honest. Every single one of us in the circle scattered and screamed. And so it was, again, I'm startled very easy. This one was a true startle. But this particular fear has stuck with me. Now,
I'm a true believer that if Eve in the Bible would have been afraid of snakes, we would still be living in the garden. If Suzie would be Eve, there would be no sin in the earth. She would have never listened. She would never ate the apple. But fear is one of those things that either will help us move forward or it'll pull us back.
So Dan, maybe you can tell the story. Let's just for a few more moments, snake talk. Now I can actually a little bit talk about it. Tell about the time in Florida when you thought you would help me get over my snake fear.
Oh, well, it's very simple. I thought it was one of those things that she just needed to get closer. She needed to observe it. She needed to come. So we were at an animal park, and they took this large snake, and they put it on her neck, and I did not force her. I just have to tell you, I did not force her.
You were like, you should.
I said, you should, but she had total freedom, and she said, okay. And they put this around her, and then the thing just started squeezing a little bit, which was not
and squirming around me.
She will never give me an opportunity like that ever again. I agree with one of the comments here. For me, it's darkness. I am afraid of the dark, and one of the reasons I believe is because my brain has. I have so much imagination going on that even now I can walk outside, walk around the house at dark. And I know something's there. I hear something. I imagine what it is. But that's an easy solve for me. For me, I carry a flashlight or I walk with someone else and that fear goes away. There are some fears like Suzie, no matter what, a snake is always going to be an opportunity to scream and run and put claw marks in my arm.
I always jump on his back, so it will push him forward.
But there are other fears that are not like snakes or darkness. One of the ones I have that I've recently come face to face with is the fear of vulnerability. What are you going to do with that information?
Yeah,
I can't control that at all. I know in my mind it's right for me to share things that are deep. It will help people. But I have in the past shared things that come back to haunt me. I will say something and years later people go, well, you always think this way. And it was from one conversation. And so vulnerability is one of those things that I want to be more vulnerable. I think it's very, very important, especially what Suzie and I do online as we're speaking to young people.
That's right.
We have to be very vulnerable, but we can't control the response. And so there's a fear, but I have to say, is it heavier to have the fear or to tell the truth? And for me, I have to move to the truth, no matter what it costs. So that's a different kind of fear. Some people have a fear of a certain kind of person because maybe they were hurt or they were abused sometimes in their life. These are real things. That fear will probably protect you for a long time. But at the same time, you need to make sure it isn't a fear that stops you from living in the flow.
Right. Right. So Dan, in our flow course, and I think that's one of the files that I just was sharing, observe your fears. One of the things that happens, Brene Brown talks about this, is you have what's called a vulnerability hangover. You're like, you feel safe and you share so much. And then afterwards you're like, oh, I went so deep and now they know this and that. And this is just really a call to gather around you those safe people. We call it the community net. Those people who know you, they're in the center of your target area. They know you, they love you. You are known by them. Those are the people to process this with. It could be your community net. It also could be, for example, pastors, youth workers, people in your small group fellowship, could be people who you feel safe with. You develop a level of safety. Also, therapists and counselors are amazing when they're experts in these fields to help you process and have this cognitive behavioral therapy and other ways of just helping you identify and process in very slow steps. So we need these kind of people around us when we're facing fears, just to process through and help us with that.
Yeah, there's a comment here, and this is a great question. How do you know the difference between fear that will move you forward or take you back? And the idea there, I believe, is there a fear that'll help you to be in a place of living more fully alive, or to get you stuck in a place that you are not living fully alive? I think there are those kind of things. I think first of all, we have to look at, to answer that question, is what does it look like for you to be fully alive?
Sure. What
is that? If you could put it in a box, what is fully alive for you? And then you step back and say, vulnerability. For me, will vulnerability keep me from living full life, or will it move me farther into being fully alive? If I refuse to be honest with my struggles, with what's going on in my life, I don't think I'm going to be able to show up well. So I will be able to look at, will that help me to be the person God has created me to be? If the answer is, I don't think so, then we have to really step back and go, what do we need to move into that? Now, it doesn't mean you suddenly go, okay, I'll be vulnerable, I'll tell everything in my life. You also need borders, and you need people.
Boundaries.
And there are boundaries that you need to set for yourself. There are things that maybe I would tell someone, but I won't maybe announce it to everyone. But I think to understand clearly what it means to move forward or back, you have to know who you are. Because if whatever the fear is stopping you from relentlessly pursuing who God created you to be,
fully alive,
that's not a fear that is going to be healthy. And you need to find help with that. But if it's a fear that is going to move you forward, for instance, I know people that, they fear for, young girls caught in the sex traffic industry. And it is like, it moves them into hero status. They step out. I don't care what anyone thinks. I'm going to rescue someone. That
allows them to be alive.
Right,
and
to be
safe.
fully alive.
Yeah. So I'm just putting up one of the tools that we have inside the flow course right now that we want to share with those of you who are on now is the verses. These are do not fear from the Bible verses. Our main verse for this particular segment is 2 Timothy 1:7 that says, I do not have a spirit of fear, but power and love and sound mind. So where does that power from God come from? The love, being loved by others, and sound mind, our choices that are going on in our mind. And I really enjoyed putting together this PDF of all these verses. So I would encourage you to download that either here or inside the flow course, and allow that to be something that you pick and choose those verses that really help shape and give you perspective of what's going on.
I also love this comment about 365 times in the Bible it talks about fear. That sounds so good. That's one for every day of the year and maybe one for leap year. But we did some study on that, and we actually found there's only 85 times. And I thought, well, that's really strange. So we did a lot of research, and it's sort of a myth that there's 365. But when when God is talking about fear in the Bible, he's not trying to say, here's something for every day. And this is the way I used to think, but much more, I am bigger than your fear. I think that's the overwhelming story. If you read the book by Louis Giglio on Goliath Must Fall, it talks a lot about fear in there. And
one of the top
the
five,
need for imagination to see beyond. My fear is going to hold me back. All the children of Israel were held back by Goliath. They had fear. But David was able to see past that through imagination and bring him down. I think the Bible talks a lot about how we need, in our fear, we need to take the risk many times with imagination to move past it and trust God for whatever is out there. And it may be tomorrow, maybe 10 years, maybe 50 years. We don't know that.
I'll just take this opportunity. This week here on Duzie Live, our theme is Observe Your Fear. That's what we're in the midst of. Next week, or the coming 2 weeks, the modules that's coming next in the flow course is what we call Courageous Imagination. But that is such a big chunk. So we've decided since this morning that our next Duzie Live next week on Tuesday, 2 time options, is going to be on courage or bravery.
Or braving. If you haven't heard the term braving, we're going to talk about it next week.
So
incredible.
We'd love for you to give responses of what you'd love to hear about this. And that's what we're going to tackle next week in Duzie Live. So please put in your calendar to come back and let's talk about like the next level of observing your fear, what to do with it, courage, bravery.
So next week is courage. The following week will be imagination.
Right. So we'll talk about imagination, faith, and how to do, we'll break that down into some segments that are digestible, because these concepts that came up, especially from this morning's Duzie Live, was so rich. Got a comment here that I'm going to pop in here. Thanks, Dale. Fear of God, I truly believe, is not what we feel is fear. I see it as like an Abba, Daddy, Father, God. You want to speak about that?
Yeah.
Like the fear of God versus this fear that we're talking about here.
It's very interesting because in the Old Testament, there were a few different terms used for father. It actually wasn't used a lot in the Old Testament, but Jesus was the first one to use the term Abba. And it was Aramaic word for that close, intimate Papa relationship. Yeah. And it was only in the Bible 3 times. Abba only shows up once with Jesus and twice with Paul. But it's this deep intimacy. And I think that what Dale is saying here is very true, that it isn't a fear of God that I am afraid of him. It is almost a much more of a deep respect, a climb into Daddy's lap and hold on to him, where we don't walk away and say, well, I'm going to do my own thing. I'm going to take care of my own. I'm going to be the loner and risk it. It's much more of stepping in great trust, which oftentimes is the opposite of fear with God. So I think many times Christianity has been based on a fear mentality. Even a lot of the evangelism structures are based on what happens if you die, fear, where it's interesting that Jesus didn't do that. Jesus talked about here and now. He used the word Zoe. I have come that you may have life. And that was talking about vibrancy, quality, a blessed life here and now. When he put the word eternal life on it, it was that a life that was not fleeting, but a life that had lasting ripple effects.
So
he was very focused in on living fully alive. And we have to be very careful, as in friendships, in church, and organizations, as parents, that we don't come across with the fear tactics. My school, when I was growing up, there was a lot of fear. If you don't read this perfectly, you're going to sit in the corner. That's not God. Abba, Dad is come to the corner. I'm here. I'm here with you.
Yeah, there's a great comment here, David. Thank you. How do you recognize, observe fears? Are there times when you notice each other's fears before they themselves do? That's a great question. And I love that. And that speaks to our net community, people who we really let into our safe thoughts and experiences. And when we're sharing, and if we're tuned in and really loving others, I think it's really true. We can notice people who are afraid of things or have these realistic or unfounded fears. And it's really good as a friend to speak into. Johari Window has this space, it's called the blind area, that the person themselves might not even know. And we as a friend or a mentor or a coach or therapist or just a family member, somebody who loves them, can help them identify and begin to ask what we call coaching questions. Active listening, you're hearing what they're saying and what they're not saying, and asking those powerful questions of what and how, so that you can really draw out of them what's going on, and you can support them and potentially even identifying the fears.
Let's give you a little
that's
secret.
Good.
This is a marriage secret, but I think it's also a life secret. So if you're married, if you ever want to be married, if you know someone who's married, this will work for you. When Susie and I are coming into any kind of conflict, when the volume goes up a little more, when you feel a little bit defensive, you can either run into the argument and prove your side, which normally is like
challenge,
throwing gasoline on the fire. It just does not work. But we have learned many times, if we're really thinking through this, in the midst of that, this could go really bad really quick. We stop, and one of us will say to the other, "What are you afraid of?"
Mm-hmm.
And it's not an accusing, "What are you afraid of?" But if at that moment in our anger or in our confusion or in "I just want to be heard,"
challenged moment,
if we can be challenged by another person to define what are we afraid of. I am afraid that if you get your way, I'm going to not be able to do this. Wow. If we can define what we're fearful of, what we're afraid of with one another, and I can turn and go, can I guarantee you, I am not going to let that happen to you. What happens is the whole argument dissipates very quickly because you're trying to defend yourself or defend someone else. There is a fear of loss. And if it can be identified, this is my fear in this conversation, and it's acknowledged, and you are reassured that that person's got your back, normally the fear drops and you can move forward. That's something we try to practice very often. And it's simply the words, just stop for a moment. What are you afraid of? If you ever see two people in an argument, an argument does not happen. Anger does not happen without fear. The base there is fear. If you can identify that, you can dissipate it quite quickly.
We were just watching a new TED Talk by Brene Brown on Braving the Wilderness, her new book. And one of the things that was a great takeaway for us was a little phrase, the story I'm telling myself. So when you're in that moment of conflict with a person, and you might be able to ask them, what is the story you're telling yourself? Or if you identify it yourself, you can say, the story I'm telling myself is that I'm afraid of snakes and I'm afraid that this is a snake moment, for example. And then that gets your friend, your spouse, the person that you're doing life with on the same page, because we can't read each other's minds. We can't read those anxious anger feelings that, our fear forms, and we can't do that.
We just met a girl down in Florida last week, and we were sitting down at a table. She was sitting there with us. We had never met her before, but we began to talk about what we do and how we help people and coach people and help them live life to the full. And she began to talk about she's got 3 kids, and she's in the middle of a separation, probably going to divorce. And she said, what are the keys to staying together? We've been together now almost 34 years.
Woohoo!
And that's one thing that we talked about is you have to be aware of the story you're telling yourself.
Yeah, that's right.
And because when you are talking to someone, you think they think the way you think, and they don't think the way you think, because you are telling yourself a story. They're telling themselves.
It's a lot of thinking.
Much of the story is a horror story because it's based on fear. If you can say, let's stop for a moment. Here's the story I'm telling myself. And they go, wow, I wasn't even there.
Yeah.
I was over in this story. You bring those stories together for some help.
Yeah. So David says, so he's given a synopsis. Great job. Sharing our fear with vulnerability enables understanding and connection. Great comment. Thank you. And Dale says, that's the difference between legalism versus relationship of love and grace with Abba Father and our Savior provider. Yeah, so good.
And this is
really
the
thank
truth,
you for sharing that.
The truth about legalism is that it is all based on fear. It is based on control. When Jesus showed up, Judaism was at a very high point of legalism. Everyone was afraid even to speak their mind, and they blamed it on, well, it's because the Romans, but it was actually the fear of the Jews. And legalism will do that. It'll force you to be in submission to a belief system that if you don't do this, you won't belong anymore. And we have such a need to belong.
Yeah, that's
so
right.
legalism works to like, I have to belong so I won't be myself. And people stop living in the flow because of this Christian communism, I call it. Everybody has to be the same and look the same and have the same. That's not God. God created Adam and Eve very different. And he's created each of us different. And I think that's the beauty. If you walk into a garden, every flower is exactly the same. It's wow, but that's it. But if you have a garden full of different flowers, it's wow.
Wow, wow, wow.
Wow. Wow. And if one flower starts saying everybody has to be green.
Ooh, that would be beautiful variety.
So I think that there's that whole journey of knowing who we are, being who we are, but allowing other people to be who they are, and even having different thoughts that spar off each other. Iron sharpens iron.
Yep, that's right. So I've just popped up in the chat. Let's switch directions slightly. What have you found to be helpful with your fears? When you have fears, and we have just put out there a variety of types of fears, and some of you have mentioned it. Ailey, you were talking about fear of sickness for your family. These are all very real fears. What have you found to be helpful in the midst of that fears? And one of the tools that I found to be so great is the exposure growth, where I'm trying to find the videos. Oh, here we go. The exposure growth tool. And I'm just going to play a portion of it. This, again, is inside of our flow course, but it will give us a little foundation. And meanwhile, we would love to hear your thoughts of what's going on.
Now you've identified some of your fears. What do you do with them? Our brains have a way of rewiring itself. It's called neuroplasticity. It has the ability to change structurally depending on how we grow. And there's something called exposure therapy that I just like to talk to you about just to get the concept here. So we have to be willing to be exposed to some of our fears or anxieties or things that we get angry about when we're observing our fears and trying to take the next step. For example, if we identify a fear that we have and we do nothing about it, but we stay in our comfort zone, like this little guy laying here like, oh, let me just stay in this safe place. And I think safety is a big deal. So we stay in the comfort zone and we just relax and do absolutely nothing about it. If we expose ourselves too fast, or we say, I can do hard things, and we just zoom to the edge, then we're going to be in a zone called panic zone. Like this guy. Oh, no! So it'll be too hard to go from comfort and doing nothing about the problem to panic. Where we want to actually be is in the grow zone, or this is a time to learn or to heal. If it's emotional, if it's a physical, if it's something that you can actually see, or it's more of an internal emotional fear or pain that you have. And what happens when you're going from comfort or doing nothing about it up to and trying to avoid the panic, but to try to stay in the grow zone, is you take very, very small steps to grow. And some of those steps can just be, first of all, if you've identified your fear, you've already taken that first step. You've been able to identify that. That's already moving out of the comfort zone. You're facing it. And then there's some other small steps that you can take to grow, to learn, to heal, to grow, to rewire your brain. The very amazing thing about the brain is it's like roads in our brain. There are roads that we have conditioned ourselves to take, and the brain will take the easiest route to go from one place to another. And the easiest route will be the widest route, or where the neurons are most connected to make a road. Well, it's during this training and this growing and learning and taking these small steps that we begin to form new roads. And the way the brain is able to rewire itself, or this neuroplasticity, is those roads that are not used so often anymore, they fall away, they fade away like an old train track that's not used anymore. And the roads that are traveled on the most, they become stronger and stronger. And this is what we want to do when we retrain our brain. Not too fast to jump to the panic zone, and not too slow to do nothing and just stay in that comfort zone, but to grow in those areas that we identify, observe our fear, and be able to take those steps necessary to grow past. So let's look at some of those steps.
All right.
We'll stop right there. I just want to clarify one quick thing that came up this morning. Matt just asked a question. So as I'm taking steps to panic? No, panic isn't our goal. That's not where we're trying to be in that space. We're trying to be in the growth zone. But when you're going from comfort too fast, and like Dan putting the snake around my neck, that was like panic. It took me too high. And we need to take steps, and even identifying your fears, as many of you have already. You've identified some of your fears. That is already a step. And we might need our friends, our people, our therapists to step in there with us, taking steps and help us to grow. And part of that growing is learning and healing and rewiring our brains, and getting the big roads of the new neural pathways.
Dale gives a comment here. Thank you very much for it, about being mindful. Do you want to read that too?
Sure. I shared earlier. Thanks, Dale. He's a 2-timer with us today on Duzie Live. We appreciate him because this is his area of expertise. So we're so grateful for you joining us again now. I shared earlier about the 3 steps. This is all about being in the moment, being mindful of us and our surroundings, and being ready and able to change our course of action. We don't avoid fears, but we learn new coping techniques to prepare and heal with them, always viewing 3 steps ahead. Can you speak about 3 steps ahead? That's awesome, Dale.
I mean, I'm just looking at it. That's like really, really cool. The whole
Great
thing,
advice.
the moment, the mindfulness, the surrounding, ready to make the change. I think that whole idea is where we need to be. That I was writing a paper yesterday on what does it mean to be stuck. And these 3 steps really are what get you from that.
Say those steps again. I'll just type them in.
Well, they're right there.
Yeah,
the moment, mindfulness, our surroundings, and being ready, the course of change. So it's always viewing the steps ahead. And I think that's where fear many times comes. Like in that video, you saw the brick wall. That it's like we're not in the woods anymore. We've come to this brick wall. We can't go any farther. I just watched this documentary of this guy who traveled in Australia 50 miles along an old railroad, and the railroad track is gone, but he wanted to make the whole trek again. And along the way, he discovered there are now 180 fences that are built. And every time he came, he had to figure out, what am I doing? Am I going over? Am I going around? And I think that is the clearest picture of life. There is a path, and we see the path. It's on the GPS, but it's not clear. And there are some obstacles. We have to go up and around. There was a guy who came up and says, I'm not going to allow you on my property. And he had to go all the way around the property. But he didn't lose sight of the goal. He was going to get to the last station. And he got there. The whole document, it was quite an amazing thing, looking at the old train, but also looking at our life, how easy it would be to come to the fence and go, I can't go any farther. Well, we need to look at those 3 steps and move farther.
So one of the things we do is life coaching. And the life coaching, we're going to have a course in Michigan on Saturday. If anybody is hearing this and you are available, please come to Davison, Michigan. But one of the things about coaching is very much helping people find these small steps. And David Taylor, he is a coach of soccer is his superpower among many others, but he is great at helping people with small steps. David, I wonder, I don't know if you're able to come on and be on video with us, or if you just want to give us a little pep talk about small steps and how important small steps are in getting towards a place, for example, growth beyond being stuck or fight, flight, freeze, or fall in the whole sector of fear.
I love what Dale has said here is the best thing about therapy is the empowerment that comes from learning from our experiences.
That's right.
That is what therapy can assist us with. It is not something to be feared, but embraced, because it can be our pathway to self-discovery and self-awareness. That's really good.
That's really
and
great.
I think that just reminds us we cannot go through these fears alone.
Yeah.
We need friends. We need community. We need professional help to help us many times move to a place of light, of life, of flow.
Mm-hmm. And currently we are sharing a PDF, Steps to Work Through Your Fears. If you want to get started on your own, this PDF might be a great document to help you, a resource. Yeah. We love creating resources for people. And we just counted up in the last 2 months, we have created 30 new resources. And these are all inside of our Duzie courses, courses.duzie.com, in case you're not already experienced and you're in that space. And so far, the 2 courses that we have are free. So please jump in. And even if you just grab the PDF downloadable resources, it's worthwhile. But
it's been a bit of a busy 2 months. It's 30 new resources and over 100 videos in 2 months.
Yeah.
I woke up this morning, I thought, I'm tired. And Suzie told me why. And
30, because I counted up, I put them all in one place on my computer, and I was like, 30. No wonder we've been working hard.
Dale,
we
thanks for coming. Enjoy your meeting.
Dale, thanks for joining us for part 2. We so appreciate your wisdom.
I don't know if David is still on to come on, or if you also had to go to a meeting.
Yeah.
But we're coming near into our time. We've been going about 57 minutes.
Time-oriented, Dan.
We would love at this point, if there's any questions you have dealing with fear. We've thrown out a bunch of things. Where do we need to go here
Questions,
to help
comments,
you the best?
emotional outbursts.
David's
here. Okay, so here's David. Oh, you've got to shoot off. Thank you for joining us. But before David goes, he gives us a nugget. I think the big thing to remember is small steps begin movement. And when you're moving, you build up momentum. Big steps can be very difficult to take. They can even inspire fear. Wow, that's a nugget. Small steps are great. 2-minute habits. Oh, we got to talk more about that. So habits that get you going, that get you over the stuck point. And accountability is also helpful in that space, and having your people around you, your net community. We really encourage you to build that.
That's one thing that was really hard for me when I was working on my 12 fears that I'm now fearing, is I came to the end of that paper and I was like, oh, wow, where do I even start? And it's like what David says, it's the little steps that start rolling, and then it builds momentum.
Yeah.
And I'm not where I was a week ago when I wrote that paper. I'm at a new place, and it's moving.
Small steps.
Which is really good. So that's great information there.
Yeah, so I think I mentioned it, maybe it was the earlier one. My small steps are 15 minutes of intensive exercise every day, and I'm on day 4. So small steps are really giving me momentum. I'm like, I can do hard things. I can do something for 15 minutes. Dan, join me.
Every day.
It's so good.
Dan, join me.
It's so good. Yeah. Yeah, so fear. Observe your fear. We've been talking about this. What kind of synopsis would you give? What kind of wisdom? Where have we been just in this Duzie Live about observe your fear?
Well, I think a lot of it came from when Dave was talking earlier about, is this fear going to move us forward, or is it going to move us back? I think that's a really important concept for each of us to look at our fears. Sometimes they may save our life. Those things we need to embrace. But there's others that you know the things that are on your heart. You know that I am not where God has created me to be. There is so much more. I'm dreaming. I have courageous imagination. But this one fear, for me, for years, one of the fears was reading in public. I don't read very well. Oh, I remember in 4th grade being called on to read. It would destroy me, just destroy me. I had a pastor when I first was an associate pastor at a church, and he would tell me 5 minutes before, Dan, I want you to read this paragraph. He knew I struggled, and he would give me 5 minutes to go through.
2-minute challenge.
I literally would memorize scripture really quick because I didn't want to get up there and look like a fool like I did in 4th grade. And I had to get past that. Now it's not, I wouldn't say it's something I volunteer to read in public, but the fear is not holding me back because there are times that I have to do that. So that's not a place where I'm stuck. I think we first have to recognize it. If we are not able to move forward, we get help to move forward. We ask the questions, is there something I can do about it? Is there something now I can do about it? Am I willing to make those choices? And then we move ahead.
Yeah.
So I think those are some of the things, some of the gems that I'm holding on to at the moment, and remembering we don't have to build the city in a day. It's one step at a time. Let's get it moving, and let's help each other to build momentum towards living life to the full, living in the flow.
Yeah, we have so appreciated those of you who have joined us live, put comments in the space. Hello, all you Dutchies who have been watching in a group time. I hope as soon as this is over, you guys have a great conversation together where you have a chat about it and you are a little bit vulnerable and you share about some of the real issues in your life and you can support one another in it. That's one of our goals for this Duzie Live Times. We put some subject nuggets out there and we begin to wrestle together. And I think there's such value. Thank you so much for everybody who contributed. The value of their perspective, their learning, their thoughts, their questions, comments, emotional outbursts, because that helps us together have more to process with. So it's very valuable to be in this Duzie Live webinar community. Thank you for joining us live. And those of you who are watching by replay, we're so happy you joined us.
So for the Dutchies, I just want to say one thing. Dewey. That means goodbye, and we are loving life.
And seeing good days. God bless you all.
Thanks.
If you have any further comments or questions, please connect with us on any of the socials or at connect@duzie.com, DUZIE.
And the replay is available online.
God bless you.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us. Bye.